It is now 2:55. I take it that we are ready, Madam Secretary?
Yes, Chairman, I believe we are, and you should be live as we speak.
Thank you very kindly. Let me therefore reconvene this 9th meeting of the Joint Select Committee on National Security of the Parliament of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. We suspended a moment ago to welcome and engage those who we invited and accepted our invitation to be with us today. That is to say, the Vision on Mission, non-governmental organization, and I on Dependency, both of whom appeared before us at our 8th meeting and has kindly consented to be with us again today in order to carry on with these deliberations. So I welcome all of you. I welcome those present, those viewing, and those of the listening audience across Trinidad and Tobago and the world. This meeting is being broadcast live on the Parliament's Channel 11 and Radio 105.5 FM, and on the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. We welcome the officials of Vision and Mission, as I said, and the officials of I on Dependency. I am Fitzgerald Ethelbert Hines, chairman of this committee, and I would like to introduce, before I allow my colleagues to introduce themselves, our very supportive secretariat, the staff of the Parliament that supports the work of this committee, led by the Clerk of the House acting as secretary to this committee, Madam Jackie Sampson Miguel, and of course, the Clerk of the Senate, Mr. Brian Caesar, who is always here in support of us on this team, Renee Batson, and others. So thank you all very much for your continued work. Let me invite my colleagues on this committee to therefore introduce themselves for the record and for your benefit. Members.
Chairman, good afternoon. Keith Scotland, member.
Chairman, good afternoon. Good afternoon to everyone. Nigel Freitas, member.
Good afternoon, Chairman, and good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you. All right, so we have those members with us. We have other members, might I inform you, who may not be immediately present, but will join us along the way, or as in one case, one who demitted the room a moment ago for good reason. So now I would like to ask for the record and for the benefit of all the audiences around the country, that the personnel, the officials of Vision and Mission, followed by I on Dependency, introduce themselves, please.
Good afternoon, Giselle Chan, CEO of Vision on Mission.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair and other members. Gerard Wilson, Chairman of the Board of Directors of Vision and Mission.
Thank you. I on Dependency.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon all. I'm Garth Sinclair, Director and Dependency.
And I'm Natasha Nunez, Director / Secretary, I on Dependency.
Thank you very kindly. Thank you very much. The purpose of this meeting is to continue discussions with you all and others as stakeholders in relation to the inquiry, which is in front of us, and to explore methods to combat organized crime, thereby circumventing its impact on the vulnerable youth in our society. The objectives of this inquiry include an understanding of the specific measures implemented to identify vulnerable youth and intervene prior to their engagement and their being recruited in gangs, to investigate the progress made towards the transformation of the prisons and the community residences from a punitive model to a rehabilitative model of justice, and of course, to assess the continuum of service options intended to ensure reintegration of persons who were in conflict with the law, their reintegration into the society. I would like, therefore, to remind us that our instruments, communication instruments, should all be on silenced or should all be turned off so as not to create any issues, and that this is a question and answer session. So you will be asked questions by committee members and you would provide answers as succinctly and yet elaboratively as possible. So I would now like to open the floor and to invite Member Scotland to begin his interrogation in proceedings. Member Scotland. Mr. Scotland.
Chair, are you hearing me now?
I am indeed, and thankfully so. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Chairman, we had left off on the last occasion where I asked a pointed question, both to Vision on a Mission and I on Dependency, about the efficacy of the anti-gang legislation, to which both agreed in the affirmative that it will assist. I would now like to move a little away from the legislative and more and look at causal connections between vulnerable youth and their attraction to crime. And what I would want to ask I on Dependency, in your submission, you said that there are not any specific processes or programs to identify vulnerable youth in the school system. Why aren't there such indicators in the school system? And what will you recommend that we can put in the school system that will enable the teachers, the curriculum, the persons involved to identify at an early stage vulnerable youth?
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, sir, for your question. And one of the recommendations that we would suggest is they were placed in schools at one time, and they're still there. They call them safety officers, and they were counselors in these schools, for want of a better description. They are too little and far below. Like, for instance, there's one officer who has to take care of 4 schools, and which means to treat with children coming into the schools with problems. Most of the time, children coming in schools acting up. They don't understand that they would leave home without breakfast. They would leave home with a mother, and if it's both parents they live with, sometimes fighting, or they will leave home with a single parent who just, couldn't get breakfast for them to go to school. So they would come to school without breakfast and they would start acting up, and apart from other things that are happening at home. And what we see is the end result. What we see is them acting up and not trying to find out why are they acting up. So I think the personnel who should be treating with these vulnerable youth to identify them should be at least, I would say, if we can afford it, at least 3 to 4 to a school, and so that they can easily identify. Because remember, we're talking about a school. Let's say a school has 200 children or 100 children. how can they really physically point out the ones and identify the ones who are troubled? And
All right.
then, understood?
Understood, sir, but remember, as part of your submission, you stated the first line, the specific measures implemented to identify vulnerable youth are non-existent until they leave school, and you identify programs such as Civilian Conservation Corps, MILAT, MyPart, which my chairman is very au fait with. Do you think if we use these as a parallel program, whilst the vulnerable youth are in school, if that will make a difference? Is a yes or no? Will that make a difference? Chairman,
yes,
you understand the question, Chair?
I certainly do.
Would you think that that will make a difference?
A huge
members,
difference.
I am reading from page 1 of the submissions made by Ion Dependency, paragraph 1, lines 1 to 4.
We are with you. Mr.
Yes, sir. Would you think that will make a difference?
Am I asked to respond now, sir?
Yes,
sure.
Please.
Yes, it would make a huge difference. A huge difference. Because
Chairman,
you see,
give me a short answer. I have my 10 minutes. I have several more probing questions for you and Vision on a Mission. Give me the short answer so I can move on.
Yes, it will make a huge difference because they are already trained to do same. So including them would make a huge difference.
Chairman, when we revert to our caucus, may I ask your most efficient and secretariat to record, subject to our agreement, that part of our recommendation, Chairman, through your office and through the good office of the Honorable Member for Gatsby Dolly, if we can try to include these programs at the primary school and the secondary school level, please, Chairman.
Thank you very much. We'll note it. Thank you.
Right. Next question. What will you recommend for this committee that can be done to make gang membership and crime participation less attractive? This goes for both you and Vision on a Mission. I would like Vision on a Mission to answer first. What can be done to make gang membership and involvement in crime with the youth less attractive in Trinidad and Tobago? Vision?
Yes, good afternoon. Mr. Wilson.
You want me to take that, Miss? You want me to take that?
I will give way to you, depending on.
All right. Right, no problem. Good afternoon, Mr. Scotland.
Good afternoon, sir.
Right. Former Commissioner of Prisons Gerald Wilson here. From my experience dealing with some of these youths, I think we have to look at, as Gard Sinclair would have indicated before, I think that we are losing our way in terms of the softer skills, so that psychologists, counselors, what have you, in primary schools, from primary schools to secondary schools, must be in touch with the feelings of these young people. Because right now, the so-called gang leaders in the communities are those persons who they emulate. So we have to find a program that is suitable to pull them away from that. Because it is very enticing when these young persons live in these areas, look at these so-called gang leaders driving nice vehicles, wearing nice clothes, having nice girls, and then they want the same thing. So the attraction to them is more or less what the community leader looks and wears and drives, and we have to find a way in the school system to show them alternatives.
What do you recommend? Tell us something. You are on the ground. What do you recommend?
I would like to.
Go ahead, CEO. Go ahead.
I would like to recommend early childhood and youth-based interventions. There needs to be a partnership between NGOs, FBOs, and also governmental organizations. The state should galvanize these resources, which should also include volunteers who would be trained. There needs to be a program that targets these young people from a from a psychological, as Mr. Wilson would have said, perspective, because their identity, many of their identities are tied towards this these criminal and gangster type lifestyle. So definitely we need programs on the ground, but it is not programs where organizations operate in silos. That is state organizations operating in silos, but we need a collaborative networking approach.
Dependency, could you give me a short answer to that, please, before I move on to my next question?
One short answer, good afternoon, everybody, would be to reiterate what we spoke about on the last occasion, which is the mandatory PTA meetings from primary and secondary.
Where you will get an inculcation and a dissemination between teacher and parent to see if we can get it into the home.
Correct, because we have found that the institutions, these institutions are often the ones that fail children at that tender age.
The government of Trinidad and Tobago is fortified, and
so before they
committed
enter the criminal justice.
Understood. We will use, Chairman, were you losing our guests there, or is it just me? Chairman, were you losing our guests, Mrs.
Yes, I certainly lost her. I certainly lost her.
Let me move on to ask another question. The government of Trinidad and Tobago, we are committed and steadfast not to lose our youth. But we have noticed that the gangs and the whole issue of drugs, gang membership, and crime has become more sophisticated. So there's now, Chairman, there's something called a Zessa drug, you know. And, you know, Zessa drugs, Zessa parties. How can we find alternative ways to employ the youth energy away from these things? In my days, it may be a game. Do you think sports can be a way to move them away from these Zessa drugs, Zessa parties? And I go for both male and female. And dependency. Vision.
Mr. Scotland, when I look at the youth, I hear the idea of sports, but I think we have to change the psyche of these young persons from school. If we have the programs in school, yes, we have the cricket, we have the sports, yes, but the attraction to these persons in the communities, those so-called gang leaders, are so strong for the youth that if we don't find creative ways to move that energy into something that is more fruitful, we will lose them again to the gangs. So I'm saying that, yeah.
What about making the attraction then of these leaders less attractive?
I totally agree.
Our anti-gang, our ward, because you know that on Friday, yes, Chairman, it was a watered down anti-gang legislation that was passed in Parliament. And I do not mean to be political. I call a spade, but this is what we are trying to do. Do you think that stronger measures but in Parliament, legislative measures, would be of assistance?
Well, some of the measures would be, but I'll tell you something, sir. One of the things that even though you remove the gang leaders from the area, but they don't change the mindset of the youth, somebody will emerge as the new gang leader. So it is not about just removing them from the system. It is about changing the psyche of the youth through programs in schools.
All right. This goes, I want to ask a question. When you look at the issue of self-esteem, you know that the learning says that low self-esteem is a causative. It is a cause that persons who have low self-esteem, maybe based on illiteracy, they will find themselves attracted to that type of lifestyle. What can we do to have behavioral pattern change, and also as part of the education system to lift those with low self-esteem that will veer them away from this lifestyle choice.
Can I jump in here, sir?
Yes.
Yeah, I apologize. We lost internet connection a while ago, so I could not respond. That low self-esteem issue has to start at home. We have to reculturalize our parents, our mothers especially. And you see, the telling a child, and this is most of the time misdirected anger. Your head big just like your father, and your worthless just like your father. You go amount to nothing like your father. And just because they're not agreeing with the father and the father not bringing the money as fast as they expect him to. So it has to start at home, a reculturing of the way parents speak with children and treat with children and give them that confidence to go out there and take on the world. That has to be the start. And also, so the pipeline, we must cut off the pipeline. That is what I wanted to, when you called on me and I couldn't respond a while ago. You see that pipeline? When a young man or woman is leaving secondary school at the end of their 5-year term, and they leave with no academic qualification or vocational skill, you might as well label them gang members from then. And if it is, we don't cut off that pipeline that feeds the gang leader, the gang members from school to the gang leader, then we will have that constant flow to them, because when they leave school, they have nothing. They're unemployable, and they are easy targets by the gang leaders.
Chairman, finally, in my 10 minutes, and this goes for both Iron Dependency. From my angle of nemesis, Iron Dependency, vision and mission, don't you think that involving the judiciary, who is part of the traditional criminal justice system, because there's the restorative approach and there's the traditional criminal justice approach, but I don't think that both are mutually exclusive. Do you think that involvement of the judiciary in this process will be beneficial to a restorative approach as it relates to young offenders? Vision, could you answer me first, please?
Well, I'd like to take this here before you contribute, because this is a pet peeve of mine, sir. If we don't take a holistic approach, which includes the judiciary, critical in the decision making, in sentencing, we'll continue to have these problems. So that is not just putting away these young people, but restorative justice allows these same young persons to make amends.
So then my question, hold on, Mr. Holberg. So then why haven't you tried through official channel, and I ask this, Mrs. Chance?
Yes.
Would you then be willing officially to engage the judiciary via an official letter?
Yes, and the answer is yes, and we have.
And you have. Excellent.
We have.
Iron Dependency?
Yes, sir.
Have you all tried to engage judiciary on officially, not a phone, not anything that is unofficial, something structured?
Yes.
Well, so years ago we did.
And what happened?
We got the drug treatment courts on the ground. However, we later learned that most of the magistrates don't support the drug treatment court. So when a young man comes, say again, sir?
Our chairman, who happens to be trained in that discipline, Chair, when we revert to caucus, can we follow up on that, please, through you?
Most certainly, Mr. Scotland. Most certainly.
Chairman, my discipline tells me that I have mortgaged most of my time. Can I be relieved to join you whilst we go up to that other place? And I will still be on the program.
You're more than welcome, Mr. Scotland.
Much obliged, Mr. Chairman. Much obliged, Vision. Much obliged, Iron Dependency.
Thank you very much, sir.
You're welcome.
I now make the floor available to Member De Freitas.
Good morning, or good afternoon, sorry. Time is a bit off, but good afternoon again to everyone, Vision and Mission, Iron Dependency, and other members that joined us a bit late. I just want to ask this question. How much of the attraction to gangs by young people is based on a self-fulfilling prophecy? And let me just quickly explain what I mean by that. You have individuals living in a particular area and the rest of society labels them as bad before they could even walk, just because they're living in a particular area. Vision and Mission may have, as well as I and Dependency, heard of the stories of individuals who have educated themselves, but they cannot put a particular location on their resume for fear of not getting the job just by the fact of where they live. Now, you may have individuals within certain communities who, for one reason or the other, may not have had the opportunity as others, sort of fulfilling a prophecy placed on them that they're going to be criminals anyway. And so they just join the gangs where they find loyalty and they find family and they find, to a certain extent, finances. In your opinion, both I and Dependency and Vision and Mission, how much of this is self-fulfilling?
Can I go first?
Indeed.
It is self, as you put it, because a young man told me once that, and he was at the YDU training center, that was called at that time, that he saw his sister and brother burn the midnight oil. Sister pressed her hair, and they got all their passes. But to get a job, eventually she had to put an address of a family member living in Diego Martin. And that is when the door opened up. But for a lot of them, they would have seen this growing up. And most of them decided, in the street language, so me going through that, and I could get it easy where I live in. And that is the self-fulfilling the prophecy, as you put it, that some of them realize that because of their address, their mailing address, that they don't stand a chance. So, and sometimes it's implanted in their minds by their own parents as well. So you'll find that, it's something that they feel that there's time to be losers, basically. And even though the Civilian Conservation Corps is right on the beatum, I walked the beatum, Mr. Hines, Mr. Chairman, you were there that Sunday when we recruited 25 people to join the Civilian Conservation Corps. I made it my business to walk the beatum and recruited 25 with the help of a couple of residents, Shirma and another young lady. And we walked and we recruited them, and they said, look, it's the first time anybody ever reached out to them. So I think it's a bit of both, to try to, even as I said, even though the Conservation Corps right there, they felt that they still didn't belong, and they joined the Civilian Conservation Corps. However, one of the problems was that the ladies had to drop out. Why? Because they did not have enough, the stipend wasn't enough for them to have someone take care of their child or two that they had. So they had to drop out. So I recommended, by way of submission to the Civilian Conservation Corps and the Ministry of National Security, that daycare centers be set up at all 8 regions. That way, the young lady can bring her child and have a child next door and stay in the program and go through the entire process. So that's one of the recommendations as well that we made. But yes, Mr. DeFreitas, you're correct. In some cases, they feel that that's their destiny.
And thank you very much. And that brings me to my main point, which is, we've been talking so far since we started about what could be done. And Member Scotland is very passionate because he wants to know, what is being done, what could be done. This is a problem that needs to be solved. And I've always understood from interactions that I've had in the past, especially with a friend of mine at one point in time who had veered away from, this was university education, and gone into some other activities. And one day I was speaking to that individual, and he explained pretty much everything that Vision and Mission and I and Dependency has said today in relation to why they veered away from education. And the point always was that if you're going to start to try and veer away young people from gangs, the first thing they need to see is what I call icons, individuals from the very same communities who have, either way from opportunity or whatever was available to them, become upstanding citizens in society. So it starts to undermine the stigma that the rest of society tends to place on them. In other words, they tend to see these individuals as getting out of the situation that they would have found themselves in, and becoming these upstanding citizens, and therefore act as a beacon to the others. I'm not hearing of any programs that would involve individuals who have become exemplars in society from these communities that have been so stigmatized, to sort of show the others that the way of going into gangs is not the only way. You have to think of it from this standpoint. And I'm speaking to the public now. These individuals find themselves in a dark room, and the only light coming into the room is through a window. Guess what's behind that window? It's gang activity. And so they gravitate towards the light because in their minds, they're in a dark room. But when it is you show them that there's another way, there's an unlocked door, there's another window that could be opened, then they tend to choose that way, because I don't believe that young people in Trinidad and Tobago actually want to enter gangs. But if it is that doing so to them is the only way that they find out, then that is exactly what they're going to gravitate towards. Because as Mr. Sinclair rightly stated, when they look at their brothers and sisters going a particular pathway and not really getting anywhere, then they're going to gravitate to the individuals who are driving the nice car, who has the nice money, who's living in the big houses, no matter how short their lives may be. So the question is, once again, how are these programs going to be tailored towards ensuring that these young people find another way out, instead of giving them handouts, which they now know isn't sustainable?
Yes.
Okay. All right. You want to go first, Sia?
I'll go very quickly. Looking at it from a mentorship, I see mentorship and entrepreneurship, empowerment. You're looking at empowerment. So it's not just, as you said, giving the youths handouts. They know that that's not a solution, but you need a community holistic approach. You need to, first of all, deal with the heart of the matter, which are social and economic issues that are relevant, that are localized, that are different for various communities. There's no cookie cutter thing. This community is the same as this other one. You have different scenarios going on in different communities. So you have to, first of all, address, and as Mr. Sinclair would have said, provide the social and economic support systems that would help young mothers and so forth in their ability to parent. Okay, and then you're looking at empowerment. We have to find ways to enhance the current programs that we have for our young people, to make it more attractive for them to seize and to look upon those opportunities of empowerment. We also need a very robust and sustainable mentorship program. And that comes back to your statements, Mr. De Freitas, where we have to integrate these successful persons, right, and find a system where they can come back into the community and give back and partner on a consistent basis. And it's not just a one-off thing. Okay, so Mr. Wilson.
Right. Thank you, CEO. A good point was, Mr. De Freitas, I take your point in terms of persons going into communities who are role models. The problem with that, and that has been consistent over the years, is that they go back into these communities, they may have a one-off, program. If it's a cricketer, he may go and have, let's say, their cricket. But these people go back to the reality of living. And the thing is, Giselle is correct when you look at the social and economic factors. If you don't deal with this thing in a holistic way, then having somebody go back as a model, right, as a model person, is going to work, yes, for a day. But then the following day, the same individuals on the street say, look, I have nothing to eat today, so he came yesterday and he living in a big house, but I have nothing to eat. So we have to look at the social and economic factors. So in Giselle's point, what is forceful in that is mentorship programs where you can have some of the adults in these communities who people look up to continue to have some program that they could mentor these people and keep them in line. Because when we have these fancy programs for one day and we leave and we go our own way, the following day they go right back to where they were before. It must be consistent.
And can I add to that, Mr. De Freitas?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes. Another thing that I discovered when Natasha and I did lectures, community policing. It must be strengthened. And that's the problem. You see, every time these community C police officers is the tactical officers, the officers who go in there most of the time to intimidate, and of course in line of duty as well. But if we strengthen the community police, because we've had several complaints from community police officers who are stationed at different locations. Some of them don't even have a vehicle, and when they have to borrow a vehicle, so to deal with domestic issues. When you have a domestic issue in a community, you don't need officers going in there dressed to kill, literally. You need community police officers to deal with some of these issues in instance. And the community policing unit must be revamped and revitalized in a major way, just like they did with the Marine Branch. We have to bring back the proper, robust community policing. And then we go after to make the gangs more attractive. And the anti-gang legislation may speak to this, but we have to put our foot down. We cannot be, we know that they are gang leaders. We know that there are people who pulling them in. Then let's deal with that and get them out of the way. And, I mean, it might be my military brain thinking here, but the training that I have become accustomed to is that you take away the head and you continue to take away the head. And eventually people get the message that this is not attractive, this is not right. And let's change our lifestyle, because the average age for some of these youngsters is like 20, 21 years, and that's it.
Thank you very much. And I understand what everybody is saying, except I want you all to take away this thought in relation to what you're saying. So we've had the TTPS in front of us, and they have re-engaged the police youth clubs to sort of attack the problem from the front end. Usually when the police is involved, you're tackling it from the back end, which means these individuals are already in the gangs, and you're sort of trying to remove them, as you rightly indicated, Mr. Sinclair, trying to keep removing the head. And hopefully the message is sent down the line. The problem is the message will never be sent down the line because of exactly what I just said. If you are in a dark room and the only light into that room is through a window by which you enter the gang, it does not matter how many people you remove from going through that window. Whoever is left in the room is going to keep going through the window because they don't want to be in a dark room. The point I'm trying to make is that all of you have raised that the issue is socioeconomic. If you understand socioeconomic issues, they are great. No one entity could solve a socioeconomic issue. It's like trying to say, I want to eradicate poverty in its entirety. You will never do that. Do you understand? It's almost impossible to do that. You can attack the problem and reduce poverty to a very low level, but to eradicate it in its entirety, it's a completely different thing. So let me ask this question. Vision and mission, I and Dependency. We have a Ministry of Social Development and Family Services. I am well aware of the fact that in relation to alleviating a lot of socioeconomic issues, there are grants upon grants upon grants for almost every conceivable thing that you could think of. Are you all aware of this? And do you all make this known to the people who may need it in the communities to either, one, help them fill out the forms, walk them through the process so that they can access these grants to alleviate some of the socio-economic issues. Trinidad and Tobago is a country where we provide these things for people that find themselves in that position. But we all know that one of the hardest problems is to access it, simply because you may not know how to fill out the forms, or you may not even be aware that it's there. That is where I and Dependency and Vision and Mission can help. Do you all have a program that can help individuals in these at-risk communities fill out these grants so that you can alleviate their situation? If that's something that you all are doing.
Can we give it a Vision and Mission first, and then we can answer?
I'd like to respond to that. Currently, the segment of the population that we assist with grants are persons who would have been incarcerated, deportees, and delinquent youth. However, we do have in train a community-based program, intervention. It's called an intervention program that is titled Triangle of Hope, where we will be targeting the children of incarcerated inmates. This was the brainchild of our chairman, Mr. Wilson, targeting the children of incarcerated inmates to build a network of support around them. We're not doing it on our own. We are utilizing some of those same services that you are speaking about through the Ministry of Social Services and Development. And we are basically going to the families, identifying these children that are at risk because of the cycle of criminality in the family. And in order to break that cycle, we will be looking at supporting them, helping the caregivers to fill out the requisite forms and informing them of what type of grants are available to them, assigning our own personal social worker, also linking them with social workers that would be given by the ministry if applicable in certain cases and so forth. So we find it critical to make that link between the resources that the state has available to persons that are at risk in a socioeconomic, from a socioeconomic perspective. We are ready and we stand able to assist in that regard.
I just want to add to that, Mr. De Freitas, the CEO doesn't even know because only yesterday it happened, but I had dialogue with somebody in that particular ministry, and I'm awaiting a call sometime today so we could dialogue on something else apart from just the youth, but in terms of the women and abused women and so on. So we are, creating that avenue for partnership, and we'll of course access whatever we can and assist wherever we can.
Can I also add that?
Sorry, please go ahead.
Just to add that Iron Dependency, through sponsorship and other means, has been linked to the Ministry of Social Development and other social service agencies. And through our radio program, we do connect people with the services that they need. But as well, we also, through our radio program, highlight the icons that you mentioned, Mr. De Freitas. We recently interviewed a young woman from Sealots who was a part of the President's Award program, and she attained a silver medal in that program. And I think it's those kinds of interventions. I mean, we're talking about, you spoke about the dark room and the window, but there are a lot of different lights that can shine through that window. It doesn't necessarily have to be a parent. It could be a community member. It could be a program like the President's Awards. It could be a national team opportunity in sport. And I think
yes,
exposing young people and their families to the opportunities that do exist. They are often not, advertised widely, and they're not sexy. But there are opportunities out there that people in those circumstances who find themselves in a dark room can access and can take themselves out of the situation that they're in.
Mr. De Freitas, one more thing I'd like to add to that, please. Speaking of grants, there is something that I pointed out in my submission to the committee, that there's one problem with incarcerated persons, and maybe you can do your own investigation. So let's say someone goes to prison for, let's say, 3 or 5 years. The Ministry of Social Development would provide a grant to the spouse of the person. But what happens when the person is released? The grant is stopped immediately. And subject to correction, that is how it happens. And then what we suggested was the grant to continue for another 4 months, because when someone comes out of prison, it takes at least a month or two to settle, especially if they've been in prison for a while. So what happens is that if you stop that grant immediately, now the mother now will be faced with an extra amount to feed and no money coming in from the ministry. So our suggestion was maybe the grant will continue for another 4 months. After
Right, we take that. Thank you very much. I would like to make a quick intervention here and direct my question very quickly, because we're going to wrap up this segment, considering that you have already given us very wonderful thoughts on the last occasion. You have crystallized them and some new ones today, for which we are more than grateful. But I would like to ask both of you in a sentence, if I may, what role, because I didn't hear it mentioned today, at least expressly, though in my view it might be implied, what role does spirituality play in all of this? I'll start with vision and mission.
Good question.
Because Wayne Chance found a new spirituality while in prison, Malcolm X too, and came out and made great lives and contributions. I'd just like to get a sense, what role does spirituality play in all of this decision as to whether to go left, to go right, up or down?
I would like to begin as being a pastor's daughter, coming from the cloth, being cut from the cloth of faith. I'm speaking from a personal level. Spirituality is the foundation, okay? And the Word of God puts it very simply: train up a child in the way he should go, so that when he grows old, he would not depart from it. And the way he should go is clearly, regardless of what religion you belong to, there are universal laws of spirituality that if we train our children to follow, our society would be better for it.
Thank you very warmly, Mr. Sinclair. Mr. Sinclair? Are you hearing me? Apparently we are frozen.
Right, I'm hearing you again, sir.
Thank you very kindly. What is your response to that question?
Spirituality.
The role that spirituality plays.
Yes, very extremely important. For some people, they found spirituality when they entered prison. I've always said I went to prison with Jesus because my mother inculcated that in me from very young, to quote Miss Chance, train up a child. And I think a lot of parents now, because of the change in the economic environment and having to hustle 2 jobs and 3 jobs, I think that spirituality aspect of growing up children has really gone out the window. And I think that, as you say, it's very, very extremely important, because it teaches a child to that you didn't put that pen there, don't pick it up, and you come home with that pen, and you cannot identify where you cut it. You're going to go back with, and take you back with it, and you know what I'm going to take you back with. So I think that part of it is very important. And one more thing, remember when we were growing up, our parents, when adults came into the home, whether it's a neighbor or somebody came to visit, the children would have to disappear. Now parents would have their child on their lap and bad talk the state and bad talk the next door neighbor and use very foul language and all of that. I think that spirituality is non-existent where that is concerned, and it needs to be rehashed.
And I have a final question to you, Mr. Sinclair, and I would want to hear Mrs. Chance on it if it pleases her. You did say in your written submissions, and you repeated it in your oral presentation to us, that in some instances, prison officers appeared unwilling to support some of the ideas, the concepts, and the new paths for restorative justice. They were stuck, according to you, in the traditional punitive model. And you also, in relation to the courts, told us even today that in respect of the drug treatment court, where it was recommended and put into practice that you have a different regime for prisoners or persons before the court who had a clear drug problem. And that was thwarted, according to you, because according to you, some magistrates were averse to and not supportive of the idea of a drug court. I would like you to demonstrate for the benefit of this committee, as briefly as you can, evidence in support, without names, of that attitude on the part of the prison and on the part of the courts, just for our benefit and record. And if Mrs. Chance wants to, in closing, say a couple moments on that, we would give way and we wrap up in this segment in about 5 minutes. Thank you.
So yes, they're from utterances. And remember, we were tasked with putting up a prison radio station, at setting up a radio station at the maximum security prison. We heard directly from officers that this was making the jail for prisoners too easy, because some of them tend to think that it must be this punitive approach. Jail must be hard labor, busting concrete, and make prisoners' lives as miserable as possible. So, and then with the programs, they would tell you directly that because some of these programs not mandatory, when we go, and I've had the pleasure to visit and do lectures with alongside Vision and Mission, and the attitude of some of the officers, they just go through the motion. And you could see that they're not enthusiastic about us being there. So sometimes we are made to wait very long periods outside. And then by the time we get in and set up in an environment that's not really conducive to education and learning, then we just barely have 45 minutes to impart with knowledge. So the whole attitude of most of these officers must change to understand that you must
and the courts,
a correctional approach.
And right? The courts.
If I may.
No. Just let me just get a little sentence on the courts, and then I'll go to Mr. Wilson, who has experience as a former prison commissioner, to see whether he supports that and whether we need to recommend some improvements in that regard. And the courts, Mr. Scotland, evidence. Mr. Sinclair, evidence.
I've been following and seeing a lot of incarcerations going on. I've known individuals who are known drug addicts. It happened recently in Tobago, Natasha and I highlighted it, where a young lady was charged for a little rock of cocaine, totaling $30,000, and she had to pay that. And that is one example. And there are a number of examples I have seen where magistrates keep sending people to prison who are known drug users. They break into a shop, they break into a parlor, they break into beauty salon and steal hair dryer and all these things. That's a take to the pusher. Now, when they go before the magistrate, and I would advise some parents, your right as a citizen is to let the magistrate know your child needs drug treatment intervention, drug treatment court intervention. And some magistrate will respond that some of you only using these drug treatment courts as an excuse not to go to jail and go on to jail. So they will send a person to jail 10, 15 times for the same breaking in, larceny, and these type of things, and not understand that you cannot lock away an addiction. You can lock away the person and the addiction will go to sleep. Once the person is released, they go back to the habit.
So shouldn't he in that circumstance be given that therapy and that treatment inside of the system? Because while he's outside and he's breaking people's places, he's creating a serious problem in the community. So if he to prison and there's a prison drug rehabilitation program on the inside, we'll achieve the best of two worlds, wouldn't we?
Well, yes, I was just about to suggest that because, again, this is something Natasha and I recommended. It was started and it was shut down for some unknown reason.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I take the point. Let me switch quickly to Mr. Wilson to see whether, from the perspective of the prison, he finds any support in your submission, Mr. Sinclair. Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. I was not only the former commissioner, I was also on the Drug Treatment Court Committee. So I am akura with some of the issues that we faced from some of the magistrates who weren't as anxious and supportive to the cause. And I'd like to say to sir that this should not only drug treatment court under Justice Hold'em was one of the ways to get that organized. But we have to look at the whole restorative justice process. It must start with the sentencing from the courts. So it is important that the court be part of the process of restorative justice so that from sentencing, we can start to work. You also made an important point, Chair, in that it doesn't make sense. We have the drug treatment court, but those who fall through the cracks must go to the prison and follow up in a program, else it doesn't make sense. So I agree.
Kindly.
Yes,
Thank
sir,
you.
the court is critical.
Thank you very kindly. Well, at this juncture, time being of the essence, I would, on behalf of this committee, and by extension the Parliament, sincerely thank you all of you, representing your two organizations, for your very important intervention in these deliberations. As you would know, We have noted, we have recorded every single word that you have said, and it is our practice to glean from it the key elements, the pearls, and the elucidation where appropriate. And we would engage these in our recommendations to the Parliament as this committee is minded to do. So I would like to thank you on behalf of all of us and to wish you good tidings as you continue to make your contributions as NGOs, as individuals, as former serious office holders in this country, in your case, Mr. Wilson and Mr. Sinclair. Please continue your good work and accept our thanks on behalf of the Parliament and the people of Trinidad and Tobago.
Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you very warmly. And of course, if you have any ideas you would like to share with us by way of improvement or elucidation, we are open. This inquiry is continuing, and we'll now suspend this proceeding to welcome the Children's Authority for an interrogation with them along similar lines. I thank you. Good luck and God bless. This element of the proceedings is now, for that reason, suspended. Madam Clerk?